What's up, everybody? Today we have Ethan Toth, Director of Sales and Marketing Operations at YCharts. Thanks for joining me, Ethan. I'm excited for this combo.
Of course. Always happy to be on this call and appreciate you taking the time. Excited for today.
Absolutely. So let's kick it off. Can you tell me a little bit about YCharts, just overall big picture, kind of go-to-market strategy and growth that y'all have experienced recently?
For sure. So, especially at YCharts, a lot of what we focus on is really empowering financial advisors, asset managers to kind of have the best in-class research, their visualization, client communication tools at their disposal to not only support their clients, but also their own growth. So, our growth and go-to-market strategy is really focused on combining a few different elements, everything from direct outreach, strategic partnerships, educational marketing. There's definitely a lot that we focus on trying to meet advisors where they are at these different channels and also, give them kind of accessibility to us. So definitely a wide range of, areas that we'll focus on. And especially for us, we've grown pretty much all of our segments in these spaces. So having both the advisors and the asset managers, a really unique spot for certain firms.
Yeah, awesome. So as a marketer, you mentioned just educational like resources. What does that look like as far as like are you trying to teach retail investors how to like use the charts or build portfolios? What does that content kind of look like?
Absolutely. For us, a lot of the content comes in a few different forms. We do have our own original research pieces that we'll put out, blog pieces that are current with the market that are definitely utilizing Y charts to draw insights and then communicate those. There's definitely individuals that will reference these, but by and
Yeah,
large, really focusing on again those asset managers and the financial advisors. And coming out of that, yes, we obviously have content that is more driven to educating on the tool itself and
yeah,
different ways to use Y charts, but really try to just stay current with the market and try and give some direct applications where we can. So some
yeah.
of it's pretty casual in terms of the educational elements of hey, these are the insights we're drawing with Y charts versus very product specific at times too.
Yeah. I've found that, tools like YCharts and AdvisorPro, the best content that you can share is the data that you get from your tool, right? Like sharing the insights that are relevant to your ICP, but come from your tool. So it's not like, hey, this is a direct promotion of using us, but it's like, no, we have this insightful data and we got it from our tool, you know?
Exactly, and especially for us, there's a lot of times where maybe we have certain visuals that we're, incorporating in this content, and maybe someone else wants to use it as from advisor lens to try and communicate to their clients. So there's
Yeah.
there's a few ways that people relate to that.
Absolutely. I do have to say, I think the Y charts, like visualization of data and y'all's just charts are some of my favorite across the market. I think y'all's platform just looks super clean. And I'm a sucker for that. So, how does Advisor Pro support your sales or marketing teams in identifying and reaching that target audience?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, there's a bunch of different channels, obviously, that will go through and reach some of our ICP. But especially, when we try to pinpoint, hey, who would this be relevant to? Really trying to resonate well with the audience and get to that target as fast as we can is super important, both from an efficiency lens, but also just ensuring that we have enough resources to, go after different opportunities. And I think Advisor Pro, one thing they do really well is kind of an extension of our go-to-markets, almost in a way where, we're using that for the list creation to create these targets. We're going through and leveraging a lot of the great data that, your team is providing. And, we can kind of use that to then apply what we've learned over the years for what our ideal customer profile is, some of the right fit elements that we look for, and, kind of target our promotional efforts towards that a bit better. And then outside of that, going into the data, I mean, there's so much that ties into having reliable data as the success of a lot of your efforts. And so, especially with Advisor Pro, we've had really current insights to be able to get down to these target criteria. And then it's just really easy to apply all of that and access the data we need. So, a lot of efficiency gains from that, but also just the reliability that ultimately is kind of the backbone of a lot of our
Yeah.
success down the road.
Awesome. Well, I love to hear that. So generating lists in Advisor Pro, how do those lists and efforts help you connect with high value prospects? Is that more of a tool for sales and the sales team, or are you using that in kind of marketing, targeting, retargeting as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. Predominantly, most of our use comes on, the sales lens and being able to find some of this criteria, but it has applications across, pretty much all uses across YCharts. Especially for us, right? If we're starting at kind of a broader sense of, is this particular piece of content or, this feature going to be relevant more to, say, an RIA or a broker dealer, right? Different ranges of advisors with experience. There's a lot of different things that is accessible very easily as a lever. And because of that, it gets pulled into a few different areas. So especially taking that like top down approach, I think is a lot more common. And then obviously, hey, great, once you have the big picture, you want to drill down into some of the contact specific criteria, whatever else it might be. It's just a
Yeah.
really nice balance of reaching quality versus your quantity and getting to that faster so that yes, from the sales side, it's a lot of efficiency in our prospecting efforts, but also from, again, the marketing lens, does
Yeah.
help you make sure that the people that you're hoping to promote certain content to, it's resonating well with them, or at least you're having a better chance at it.
Yeah. No, I love how you said like a top down approach because I think that's the way that we do a lot of our marketing and outreach is filter like the broader ICP and target market and strategize a plan to attack that, but then taking that and siloing off different like very specific verticals, creating content and different ways of outreach for those. And that just it's an inverted pyramid. Like you can get as small and as detailed as you want if you keep coming up with new ways to filter lists and new ways to target these individuals. So love that. Couldn't resonate more. Um, are there any specific examples of success or wins that you can share from using Advisor Pro?
Yeah, I think the most tangible would be something that's a little bit more again on the efficiency side. With Advisor Pro in particular, there's some really great things that I think you and the team do in terms of focusing on trying to make it easy for everyone to have the resources they need to go after and chase the opportunities they would like to. So for us, in the past, there's certain campaigns or right access to data that we might have to go in and manually rely on what our team has learned over time or something else. But having a lot of this accessible and central gives us a really fast way to create repeatable and sustainable processes that allow us to kind of scale without necessarily needing to do a ton of additional work, right? So I think
Yeah.
a lot of the successes we have are really around streamlining our ops processes in particular. Especially when we talk about going to events and conferences, which are, again, a pretty big channel for a lot of folks in the space, us included. And
Yeah.
when you're there, it's a very time sensitive, experience, right? So the faster you can get to that and the more prepared you go into a conference, definitely the better. And we've had some, good conversations at events, and been able to, build on them over time. And it's been a good channel for us.
That's awesome. Are you guys using the map view feature at all to like plan, conferences or traveling to certain areas?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. For us in particular, we don't have a lot of our direct users using the map itself. We predominantly, as an org, kind of centralize a lot of what we do with Advisor Pro and then kind of give our users the access to the results and the actual data that they need. So that's a
Gotcha.
big kind of like distinction.
Yeah.
Definitely a little different than some of the wholesaler asset manager side
Yeah.
that's their, lifeblood in a lot of ways.
I get that. So you mentioned processes. What kind of like automations and workflows do you have set up within Advisor Pro? Are you, syncing data over to a CRM, or what does that look like?
Absolutely. That was really one of the best things within, our experience with AdvisorPro, and since we've kind of onboarded, is we primarily operate out of HubSpot. And for us, the AdvisorPro and HubSpot integration has pretty much been the backbone of everything you do with AdvisorPro. Really within the AdvisorPro portal, our ops team will go in and use that for some more detailed use cases or something else. But our sales team, really leverages all of the AdvisorPro info in HubSpot because of that integration. So I
Yeah,
think
that's awesome.
the automations, especially the weekly updates and things like that, the team can set up, the customizations that we can build within the integration. Quick shout out to Hasem, who, is a really integral part of, being part of the support process and building out, things that are relatively maybe uncommon, but
Yeah.
he's always willing to have a conversation, figure out a use case, and that's
Yeah.
been a great experience. And our team definitely uses a lot of that to target their efforts within HubSpot.
Yeah. That's awesome. I know that, client feedback and requests can be cumbersome. But I think, just from the tech side and development side of a product, it's such a good way to understand the market more and just get more intel on how to make the product better. So I know like a lot of teams out there, like, yeah, it sucks. We don't want to do one-off things for every single client. Oh my gosh, you have good ideas. But a lot of these client feedback ideas that come in turn out to be like the best parts of our platform. Hey, I think you guys should have this filter. Why don't you? And we're like, oh my gosh, we didn't even think about that. And then it's added. Shout out to Hasem and the team. They go above and beyond, and our clients are very happy because of it.
Yeah,
Um, okay, talking about outreach, are you guys using LinkedIn as part of your sales outreach strategy?
absolutely. So for us, LinkedIn is definitely a core channel. Again, there's a lot of different channels that we might leverage, but especially meeting, our market where they are, both asset managers and also the advising space. There's a decent audience on LinkedIn. So yeah, it's a big part of what we do. And in a lot of ways, it's almost complementing AdvisorPro. Again, the data that feeds into HubSpot from AdvisorPro through the integration, that's great. And it gives us access to, a lot of the info that we leverage day to day. But LinkedIn is a great way to kind of build those relationships, add on top of that, meet folks where they are, whether it's connecting with them, adding content, and, showing things that are relevant that could resonate with them, right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of different, tactics there, but it is very much a complement to what we do with Advisor Pro. And I think, one of the things that is helpful in a lot of ways is, Advisor Pro giving access to potentially finding some of these connections on LinkedIn or spurring your interest in wanting to learn more about someone, and, taking that opportunity to connect has been really valuable.
Love it. It always blows my mind because it seems like a no-brainer, but I still talk to a lot of companies, firms, whoever that don't use LinkedIn to reach out to people.
Mhm.
And I'm like, what are you doing? Everyone's on there.
Yeah, and
Like
it's such a weird experience
like
too
that's where
because
the market is. I know you don't want to
right.
do social media, but send some DMs. It'll probably help.
Yeah, and especially trying to get, stronger conversations and, building that relationship from the start.
Yeah,
It's very much a different game when you're taking that approach. And especially, in our industry where we do have so many DBAs and there's a lot of different organizational elements, the team's data set and Advisor Pro being one of them, that doesn't always show up in LinkedIn, right? Maybe they resonate
true.
more with a different, association or whatever it might be. But that gives you so
Yeah.
much more insight in terms of learning about that and where to kind of, again, start building that relationship too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny too because we get our breakaway advisor data in real time. As soon as someone files that they're jumping firms or starting their own RAA, we have that data. And it's funny how many times I'm, building lists or checking things, and I'm cross-referencing breakaway advisors to their LinkedIn, and we have that knowledge like before they've even posted it on LinkedIn. And I'm like, that's kind of cool because, I want to call out this breakaway advisor, but I also don't want to leak any data that like isn't public knowledge yet, you
Yeah,
know?
and LinkedIn's an interesting, place too, because everyone has their own way that they kind of approach their profile and their outward perception of it. So, some people are very proactive in their updates, and you might even find things, on LinkedIn that point you in a different direction, or, maybe they share a post that's interesting that kind of ties into the breakaway too. So, it's
Yeah,
a big part of the industry for sure.
absolutely. Okay, in what ways does Advisor Pro help you uncover new opportunities or prospects that may have been difficult to find through other channels?
Yeah, I think the biggest dynamic of this is, when you do have the automation and again, you have efficient processes, right? It gives you a little bit more bandwidth to go and, find these opportunities you might not have been able to want to pursue, but you kind of had a gut feeling that they were out there. And it gives you the opportunity to kind of leave some of these traditional, search methods, right? Obviously there's a lot that folks can go and find on their own, but it takes them time, and that's really the most important thing when you're trying to get through this and convert on leads too. So I think the biggest thing is that deep visibility into not only the company level dynamics, but also the contact level dynamics. And once you understand, those profiles and you can recognize those patterns, great, you can set up automation that make it very easy to come back to those. And so our big advantage out of that really is trying to find like some of these, niche segments and boutique firms that we might not otherwise have been able to find. And now
Mm,
it's easy for our team to go there because, we can build out that logic for them.
yeah,
So there's a
that's
ton of
awesome.
examples of that. And again, I keep coming back to the DBA data set. That's just such a powerful tool that historically is really challenging and manual for firms to maintain. So
Yeah,
that especially has been different in how we approach these conversations and kind of uncover those connections.
that's awesome. So I would say, YCharts is definitely one of our clients that like takes full advantage of Advisor Pro, and I feel like you guys are like actually utilizing the tool the way that I wish most clients would. Like there's so many different features and things that you can do in Advisor Pro that, is almost like overwhelming to someone that doesn't have just logic, knowledge and logic of, automations and processes. So what like features in Advisor Pro stand out the most? Like, is there a particular tool that's become a must have, or, what are your favorites?
Yeah. We talked about a few of them, but at the highest level, there's just so much that exists, and you kind of need to take it in phases almost. And I think for us, the first phase of quickly became our favorite feature for a long time was the integration. It's a lot of upfront work that goes into building a data provider and a CRM integration, especially HubSpot being that there's a lot of nuances, but especially when, that's there and you can keep your reps centralized in your CRM where they're already spending most of their time. There's so much efficiency gains that come out of that and just extra opportunities, connections that you'll build over time. Whether or
Yeah,
not you're quickly going through and trying to understand your sales territory, for example, as a account executive, are you leveraging this to understand the breakdown of the prevalence of different custodians? Are you going through and trying to figure out, you mentioned the map earlier, right? If you're already in an area and you want to go see some offices, you have geography at your
yeah,
access pretty quickly too. So building those targeted lists and prioritizing outreach in HubSpot wouldn't be possible without the Advisor Pro integration, and that's definitely a core. Outside of that, I would say by far the biggest one is the DBA and Teams data set. Again, such an interesting dynamic, and it's constantly changing,
yeah,
especially when we're in an industry that not only do you have these registered entities like the RAs and broker dealers, but when you start splicing the OSJs versus a DBA and more
yeah,
of the layer under that, how are they associated to these other firms that are registered? I think that's been super powerful because otherwise, you lose sight of that. Yes, you can have access to teams and see them quickly, but you're probably going to care a little bit more about, how are they affiliated with their parent companies? Does that
Totally.
impact, how you might approach that conversation? And
Yeah.
so a little bit of a niche answer for the DBA one would be, the parent company info that, Advisor Pro can kind of provide there. That's really cool and has been pivotal for us.
Well, I love to hear that. Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, you can't just reach out. Like, if you're targeting LPL, what are you going to do? Email, 50,000 people? Like, no, you need to know the teams that make up LPL so that you can get in touch with the decision makers, right? And, I think that's a super valuable data set that, not enough people are using. So, it's awesome to hear that you guys find that valuable. All right, so what are the most successful channels for your sales and marketing outreach? Is that cold calls? Is that cold emails, webinars, events? Um, you know, where do you see the most value?
Yeah, I feel like the answer to this changes pretty much every day too. It's very much one where I don't think that there's ever going to be a channel that is consistently performing over time and we can always rely on it. And for
Yeah,
us, we're definitely more omni-channel. We take a very multi-touch approach and really combine, our SDR efforts with maybe some of the personalization and, other campaigns that they're already working on or our marketing team is working on. And the educational content alongside that with the webinars or, any of the original research we put together, a lot of that gets referenced by the sales team. So it's kind of hard to say which channel in particular because in some
yeah,
ways it's cyclical. It all feeds back to the same narrative and the same value that you're providing. But at the end of the day, there's also not much that replaces in person and
yeah,
relationship building. So events are still a very big part of our, focus. And again, for us, Advisor Pro, they really do help make everything as targeted as it can be when we are reaching them at each of these channels. But I would say definitely the in-person events and kind of trying to tell the same story in all the other channels we're using that
yeah.
ultimately will give us a better chance of starting the conversation.
Absolutely. I think it's so important for a team to have synergy between sales and marketing. Throughout my career, it's insane that I've experienced so much like butting heads with sales teams.
Hmm.
Like we're not getting enough leads, or we need different content, or I can't sell because you didn't make that video. And like when you figure out how to weave sales into pushing content or targeting people that we're already retargeting in different touch points, I think that's where you ultimately find the most success is kind of having just a one brain approach to all of your content and outreach at the same time. So that's awesome. Okay, last question. There's other options on the market. I'm sure that Advisor Pro wasn't the first and only option. So, what made Advisor Pro the right choice for YCharts over other tools or providers?
Yeah, as much as we like to think it's a niche space, there's always going to be, alternatives. And, for us, we definitely have seen a few other data providers over time. We've used, others before in the past before Advisor Pro. And I think really the biggest differentiating factors for us would be, we talked about this HubSpot integration, the layer of support, really the entire team at Advisor Pro is very nimble and open to feedback. And I think that mixed with all the strong data quality, the positive experience we had throughout the sales process, supporting potentially some test use cases and some weird nuances we might have had, I know we've shouted out Haysom once already, but we'll give him another one for this in particular because when you work with integrations and especially you have some legacy things that are coming over, you really do want to make sure that, it's as seamless as possible and that you're planned
True.
properly for that launch. And that confidence that we had throughout the process was a huge differentiating factor. And even since, we onboarded, I do think that the Advisor Pro support has been by far one of the biggest differences we've seen. And the consistency, right? There's
Yeah.
something to be said about being a reliable provider that truly does want to build relationships and go through and build the product for their market versus what they think their market wants, right? And this is one
Yes,
thing that, especially YCharts, we kind of do a similar process where if what you hear from your clients is probably going to be what should be your next product enhancement most of the time. And
totally.
if you're hearing that enough, you mentioned it earlier, that's where AdvisorPro's new releases sometimes come from. And we've been the source of a couple of those over time. We've benefited from the source of others, and it's just nice to kind of have that support mixed with the reliability and the quality of the work too.
Yeah. I think, it's so important as a data provider or just a software tool in general, especially when dealing with enterprise clients and these companies that have their system and processes in place already, to have that flexibility to be able to build into the platforms and tools that they're already using. Like if they spend so much time and effort, like creating this foundation in their tech stack, it's not worth being that tool that doesn't fit into the puzzle. Like sure, it's not the easiest thing, but you have to figure out a way to be able to support the clients in the way that they're like already finding success. So a third shout out to Hasem and the tech team. I think they're great at that. And I couldn't speak more highly of our customer success team. Every single day I'm like, you guys are doing that for a client? Like, what? It's so much work, and
Especially for some of the enhancements that are submitted and they're manually doing it, trying to submit tickets and everything. It's a
exactly.
thankless job sometimes, but Hampton and the rest of the team are great. So it's been awesome to
Absolutely.
see you guys grow and also see, the service and the level of support stay the same too.
Yeah. Well, Ethan, that was great. Thank you so much for joining me today and just sharing a little bit under the hood of how YCharts is using Advisor Pro and how it's helping you guys grow. So thanks again for your time. I think this was great. Good piece of content for the both of us. And, we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Cole, and appreciate the time to share a little bit of our insights.
Awesome. Thanks, man.